Welcome to the AstonMTB channel. We've got a new bike to show you. This is going to be one of the future projects. The iconic, ultra rare Sunn Radical Plus. This is one of the most iconic mountain bikes ever. Nicola Vujo's 10 times world champion, won multiple world championship rainbow stripes on one of these bikes. I've never seen one for sale. I always wanted one ever since I saw Dave Richardson, Davro, who's now the manager at Leisure Lakes Bikes in Wolverhampton. He used to have one. He was sponsored by Sunn at the time. And I remember seeing him ride down the street past me as a kid. And I was like, what the hell is that thing? I've never seen anything like it. From that day, always wanted one, never ever seen one for sale. 2 years ago, I did a part exchange for a Nicolite e-bike for way too little money and way too much money for this. I don't want to say how much it cost me, but it cost me way too much money, but it was worth it. The only one I've ever seen for sale, never seen one since. Absolute beauty for the collection. This bike's from 1999, I think. At the time, it was an icon. It was completely way ahead of all the other bikes. It was something that no one had ever seen before. And it's got loads of really interesting details that I think would still put a lot of bikes to shame in 2022. Let's have a look at some of them. So starting with the heart of the bike, the frame. I believe this was made in St. Gaudens in France. The company at the time was headed by Max Commensal, now Commensal Bikes fame. Steel frame, full Columbus tubing. Got this beautiful twin top tube which splits down and houses the main pivot. It's quite a high main pivot, which is nestled between these two structures, part of the frame. Very similar to the new GT Fury that's just coming out. They've nestled the main pivot between two tubes to give it more stiffness. 23 years ago, Sunn were on this. High pivot, there's no idler wheel, but yeah, fairly high pivot and a trailing linkage. So a trailing or pulled linkage, lots of modern bikes have this now. Commensal Supreme, Norco HSP, the new Norco range, a lot of bikes. The reason you want a trailing link is the swing arm moves and pulls the linkage, and this naturally lets everything stay relatively straight. If you're pushing the linkage, it's always trying to bend one way or another. Think of pulling a caravan. If you pull a caravan behind a car, it always follows the line. That's what this link's doing. If you try and reverse and push the caravan's always trying to go off in a direction, and it's really difficult to keep it in line and reverse. Trailing link. So there's one link that pulls another link, which gives the shock some progression. Don't know how much. We are going to get this analysed. So yeah, 23 years ago, wow, fantastic design. Still feels absolutely amazing. The shock feels great. Super smooth linkage. Yeah, really impressed. While we're down here with the linkage, this huge shock at the time, this shock must have been absolutely massive. Look at the size of the reservoir. It's got an IFP adjuster. There's some other adjustments on here. Not exactly sure what they do. Coil spring, obviously. Why would you use anything else? It's even got the little grub screw to stop the spring rotating on the spring collar. And spherical bearings, spherical bushings on the shock. Again, reduce friction, keep everything in line, stop the shock getting side loaded. 23 years later, I think EXT and Push do spherical bearings on their shock. Nobody else. And it's a great way to reduce friction, stop side loading of the shock, and give you a better suspension feel, grip, all that stuff, all that good stuff. 23 years ago, fantastic. The front suspension, not as impressive as the rear suspension. There's been pissing oil everywhere. There's oil all over the brake, all over the floor, everywhere, all over the tyre. no damping, slight top out. But yeah, again, like the rear shock, Boss, Obsys, Olivier Bossard system, now Boss suspension. Again, back in the day, I don't know what forks other riders were using in 1999, but they didn't have a Boss upside down, beautiful machined fork, possibly also made in France in Toulouse. We believe this has got 150, 155, possibly 160 travel, not sure. I'm going to get in touch with Boss, see if they can rebuild this. One thing it does have, a huge axle. I think it might be 25mm front hub axle, and this big old front hub. It's also got some adjustments under the bottom of the fork, and also on the top there's some little screws, don't know what they do. Also interesting to note, 3 pinch bolts on the lower crown and 2 on each point on the upper crown. This is to stop flexing, stop twisting. This is a problem we had recently that hasn't been solved on my €3,000 2022 Carbon Dorado. Twisting, one of the twisting problems. This doesn't seem to have it. More bolts, more clamping force. Again, 23 years ago, what a great thing. So on some boring details, good old square tapered crank, probably not the safest or the strongest, but that's what they had back in the day. Original 23-year-old one-up flat pedals. For some reason, one of the only standards from 23 years ago that's the same as today, the pedal thread insert. All the other standards have changed. Pedal thread insert is the same. Massive 44 tooth chainring. Back then, a lot of the tracks were super fast, super high speed, lots of pedaling, fire road sections, big chainring up front for driving forward at 60, 70 kilometers an hour. Modern downhill bikes, you don't really see this as much because even though the tracks are really fast, if you're doing 70 kilometers an hour, you're probably not pedaling. You're probably flying over bumps and rocks and jumps. Back in the day, they were doing 70 kilometers an hour on fire roads, trying to go as fast as they can. At the back, 8-speed gears, boring Shimano STX mech. I don't think this is what the racers were using back in the day. They're probably using XTR. Nico Vujos had a special derailleur at the time, which reversed the lower cage and basically put the lower cage up here. And that was to give more clearance and stop the chain flapping. Also, when it comes to chain flap, we've got this extra, I don't know what it is, derailleur cage. Unfortunately, it's loose, so it's moving. But this is another way to take up some slack, stop the chain flapping around, keep it quiet. Sort of a nice touch on the bikes, on those bikes back in the day. Well, so we've got 36 spoke wheels. Nico used to be a bit of a dork about his spoke tensions, and I'm sure he was never running them this tight. But yeah, 36 spoke wheels with Mavic D521 SUP rims, these classic iconic grey rims front and rear. Michelin Comp 16 tyre, made in France. The rubber's now super hard on these, but when these guys came out back in the day, wow, they were super soft, super sticky, super tough. People were racing them, I remember in the UK, 13, 14 PSI, because they were just so stiff at the time and so grippy. At the front, the massive 3-inch Nokia and Gazzolodi, sort of the opposite to this thing. But yeah, back in the day, people used to run huge front tyres sometimes to try and give you more cushioning and grip over rocks and rough surfaces. Nowadays, looks a bit out of place, but still pretty funky part of the design. The bigger tyre might also give you a bigger wheel size, diameter, help it roll over the bumps more easily. Also, bigger tyre, you can run lower tyre pressure, again, help your rolling speed. Lower tyre pressures roll faster over bumps. Maybe that's a good idea on the front. What else we got? 23-year-old dropper post, got the full range. Just this little lever here, no mechanical, no hydraulics to bleed, none of it, just classic dropper. Hand powered, great length on it too. Old school feature, I'm not sure if it's a feature or just how the bikes used to be made. Full external cable routing, this will keep the mechanics happy and the Nikolai fans. Full external routing, you don't have to take any parts off the bike to remove the gear or the brake housing. Partly old school design, partly a much better solution for racing. This is a race built as a race bike. You don't want internal routing on a race bike. That's just stupid. It's purely marketing. Full external routing, nice. Runs all along the top of the tubes. There's nowhere for it to get snagged. There's nowhere for it to get stretched under the BB or inside the frame. Yeah, great cable routing. Which brings me on to the brakes. I was wrong. OBSYS doesn't stand for Olivier Bossard System. It stands for Obstacle System. Obstacle System. There's another nice feature next to this sticker, the little Sunn logo cut out of this gusset. Last feature, Formula brakes. Again, at the time, hydraulic brakes were not a big thing. Formula claim they made the first hydraulic brake ever, but so do Hope, and so do Shimano. I'm not sure who's right. But yeah, Formula brakes, made in Italy. Hydraulic, 185mm rotors, front and rear. 2-piston, obviously don't have any power, although all of our favourite brakes at the moment are the 2-piston Formula Cura, which is the modern version of this. And they're one of the most powerful, reliable, best feeling brakes we've ever used. 23 years ago, this is like the original version of those brakes. The rear brake's really nicely nestled within the swing arm here. Keeps it out of way. It keeps it out of the way of rocks or damage, or if you crash. Calipers nice and protected. Floating rotors with an alloy spider. Super wide braking surface. More braking surface. More power, I guess. Yeah, the brakes are one of the major issues we've got with turning this into a rideable machine. First main problem, fork. That's a big job. Second, the brakes. When I took the rear wheel out of this bike to transport it in my van, I took the wheel out and one of the pistons and the brake pad just fell completely out of the brake. So these brakes are completely unusable, but we're going to try to find a solution for that. We're going to try and find a solution for the fork. And yeah, this is a new bike for the channel. Next thing I'm going to do, we're going to strip it down, check everything. We've already found one crack in the head tube, which is a bit frustrating. Strip it down, check everything over, make a plan and renovate this into something, hopefully, very interesting for the channel. If you like it, again, link in the description to my competition site. You can buy competition tickets to support these projects. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, all that stuff. And see you soon for some more interesting bike videos.